At what time did you begin to get visions and dreams about World War III?
Well, initially, I think I had a nervous tension about that. Just early on, just with my adolescence, as my abilities were starting to turn on. And it wasn't until I finished my clairvoyant training that I went through about a 3 to 4 year period of just one vision after another of either natural disasters or wartime events or moves by what I call the final antichrist or the Russian leader and those type events. And they basically tapered off because I couldn't stand it. Frankly, it was scary. It was a scary time in my life. That was over 10 years ago of having those visions, seeing those events. They were so lucid and they were so real that it was almost like going through the experience. And I mean, I literally just begged God, stop it, because I couldn't tell time. I didn't know when these things were going to happen. At that time, an alliance between Russia and China was unheard of, and so I had no way of gauging when these events were going to happen, and they were pretty scary to me, so I managed to just block them out until 911. Then when 911 happened, that was kind of one of the first things that, I mean, that's really when World War III started. I think that's what a lot of people already say that, and people that would look back in time would say that that's when World War III started. And that was something that I saw in those visions. And now recently, everything that Putin has been doing and the way the new president has been put up and Putin steps back but still retains power, and just all his threats and all that stuff was stuff that I saw a long time ago. And it's very concerning. It's quite frightening.
I've been talking to a lot of different people through email, vice versa, that have had similar visions, similar feelings. I've looked around the web. I sent you a link briefly last night. And there are other people as well that have seen this potential scenario play out. And there are a couple specifics that they bring up and you bring up as well in terms of how it could unfold. Can we walk through this just a little bit? I noticed that one of the themes was the instability, if you will, of the West Coast, the Chinese troops, and Russians, of course, taking the East Coast.
Yeah, you know, I want to reiterate that there is a happy ending to all of this. So even though we're going to go into detail of some doom and gloom type stuff, there is a happy ending, and there is a way to be able to navigate all of this without losing yourself to post-traumatic stress, or, I mean, that's how serious for Americans things can possibly get. And so I think for us Americans, what we're going to start to see is, I mean, we're already hearing the rhetoric and we're seeing the posturing between the East and the West, and we'll continue to hear that as time goes on. But then we're going to start to see natural disasters in our country, so we're going to be gripped by the television watching things happening on the West Coast, like earthquakes in the Bay Area. You guys have a volcano in Seattle and earthquakes in San Diego. So there's going to be a lot of activity in a very short period of time that's going to have all of America gripped to the television, just kind of watching things unfold. That's what I've been shown is the precursor just before the war starts. You know, even though you see all this posturing going on today in the news and this rhetoric coming out of Russia and sometimes out of China, I don't see them attacking us tomorrow. They need to build a case against us in the international community, and they do have a tremendous amount of fuel, as you know, things that we've done, places that we've destabilized, and even this move in Kosovo, the attitude, the announcement that Russia has made about that is basically to the international community to make America look like it's violating international law. So they need to spend time making us an enemy in the world. And so that's what we're going to be seeing out of the new president of Russia, and we're going to be hearing Putin speaking much more violently, much more militarily about handling America. So we're going to see that kind of shift happening, but we're going to have some time. That's going to give us a little time to enjoy life as Americans and be able to have that. So we'll see these natural disasters, I think, come in first, I'm hoping.
I remember you had mentioned that San Francisco in particular, once we see that, if what you're saying actually ends up being accurate, and I notice other people have said the same thing, an earthquake in the San Francisco Bay Area could be the thing that triggers some other things that eventually lead to the invasion.
Yeah, being a native to San Francisco, I was born here and I grew up in Marin County. This is my home. I know it very, very well. So, of course, that was a series of visions that were very upsetting and very scary to me and very interesting in a way, very detailed, showing me a series of earthquakes, not just one but two in a row. First a 7, and then about 3 months later, an 8-point earthquake in the Bay Area. And the first one is so shocking. You know, us Americans in general, and I can say for Californians for sure, don't really know what an earthquake is capable of. And we look at Northridge and we look at Loma Prieta and we think, oh, that's what a 7-point earthquake is. Well, you don't really know, because the force from those earthquakes were headed in the opposite direction of the populated areas, and they were way off in the mountains. The Loma Prieta, the 89 earthquake, was not even a Bay Area earthquake. So when the next 7-point earthquake hits in the Bay Area, and it hits a Bay Area county, and if the force is directed towards the populated areas, it's much more severe than what we have seen. It's looking more like something you would see from an 8.0, something far more intense. So fortunately, I've seen a very low death toll with that. I've just seen people isolated in Marin County for up to a week before the military comes in. We're going to be seeing military evacuations of San Francisco, up and down the peninsula, the East Bay. I mean, it's going to be a very big drama that we're all going to be involved in, whether you live here or not, because it's going to be on the television 24/7. So we're all going to be living this. Especially that first week is going to be a week of mourning for the whole entire nation. And I kind of, if these things do unfold the way I've seen them, thank God for that 7-point earthquake, because the 8-point earthquake that follows a few months later is so severe that it completely destroys the San Francisco Bay Area. And if we hadn't had that earlier earthquake and people hadn't gotten out of there, we would have seen a lot more death. It would have been a lot more horrifying. And it's within months after that that the Chinese start coming in through the West Coast and begin their invasion. You know, I see it up and down all over. The hot spots are California, Nevada, Oregon, Washington, Idaho is on the edge there, and Arizona is on the edge there. And those are areas that they're going to capture and claim, and I wouldn't want to be anywhere in those locations when they begin their invasion. You know, the Russians and the Chinese are going to start with a bang. It's not going to be anything. I've seen most Americans not even knowing why we're being attacked or who's attacking us.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We had some anti-terror drills here in Portland that you may have heard about or read about, Top Off 4. And this was taking place as they had war games across the sea shortly after the announcement of the joint military drills between China and Russia under the SCO. And that wasn't even in the press as part of why perhaps we were engaged in those drills in Portland, Oregon, in Guam, and Phoenix.
Yeah, well, that's why I say we're looking at some real serious posturing going on here. Even the satellite that was allegedly falling out of orbit and us having to shoot that down is really just, that's us kind of reacting to China and Russia and letting them know that if you mess with us, we can play these games too, because we already know that China can do that. And again, to me, that's alarming when you see that kind of behavior going off. But, you know, most Americans, I can't really say why most of us aren't going to know. I mean, obviously the people listening to you are going to know, but most people aren't going to know what's going on, and I can't really say why that is. There's so many channels that we can flip through, and some of us don't like to watch the news, and we're just not aware that there's a missile defense shield, and there's these things that are going on in the world, and that's why they want to blow us up.
I want to ask you this, Leon, real quick. I want to keep my questions around what you've seen, but just to pause here, In our own research on this show, we've also read reports about a lot of cooperation between these countries while they also prepare themselves for war, which I find to be a little bit strange. Now, I don't think that we're going to get all the answers in time, but there is something strange about our country giving Russia nuclear reactors and then giving it to Iran. There's something strange about the relationship that we have had historically with China, and our buildup of that country to a certain degree, and the control of China through the UN, their one-child policy, that's been looked favorably upon by like Kissinger and the Rockefeller family. So there's a lot of questions I'm still asking about the strange relationships that still go on behind the scenes with these organizations, with these powerful figures that operate behind closed doors.
The best I can figure with that, is there Illuminati? Are they all kind of doing different things? Or what's the deal? What's the underground deal there? The best I can really see with that, and when I look at the Russians and the Chinese, is I see very old people and very old ways of thinking. So I see very old communist ways of handling things and very old plans. And I think the Chinese and the Russians especially, have probably been planning this ever since they lost World War II. I mean, at least some divisions of Russian generals have been off, figuring what they can do, and the plans have maybe gotten quite dramatic and often patient. That's why I can say, breathe easy for the next year more than likely, because they're very patient. They need to build that case up, and they've been very patient since 9/11. And allowed America to basically make an ass of itself across the world, so that when they do attack us, they can be the heroes, and they can justify their reasons for attacking us. I don't like to even talk about or even post on the internet, but as far as the Middle East is concerned, and I mean, America's not going to say anything about that because they don't want to threaten us. That's why they're not going to tell us this satellite deal is part of the missile shield and part of letting China and Russia know that they'll knock their satellites out if they dare attack us as well. I mean, that's too scary to talk about. That's why we need people like you, so that we can talk about this stuff. But they're not going to admit to that kind of thing. That goes against everything that they stand for.
Let's go back to what you see in terms of after the earthquake, and then from there we can have a deeper discussion about realizing who we are and to a certain degree where we are as these things transpire around us on a spiritual note. But in terms of the physical, what else do you see about that same time that the Chinese take the West Coast?
Well, I see it starting with a missile attack. I just see us one day as Americans waking up and seeing that we're being bombarded by conventional missiles, especially on the East Coast in Washington, D.C. And I see these missile attacks as very precise and hitting government installations. I see it being very clean. I see it scaring us, and especially people that live along the East Coast, and so they're all packing up their cars and driving and flooding the highways. We already have a mass exodus that's going on from the West Coast, and we also have like FEMA and our troops on the West Coast because of the disasters and everything that's going on there. So it's kind of the beginning, and I think they're just going to watch us fall apart internally before the troops actually come in, because the troops are going to be called quote-unquote peacekeepers, and they'll be Russian-led, but most of the troops will be Chinese, so it'll be both Russians and Chinese coming in. And they'll be coming up to Americans saying, our way is a better way. They have a plan, and if you follow our way, everything will be good for you. And it will be. They'll take you in and they'll give you a little implant in your hand that'll have cash value that you can build your new life with. And so it'll be very seductive, and it'll seem very, very peaceful to some people. Of course, other people aren't going to go for that, especially people that are going to, see that as a mark of the beast and a scary anti-Christian thing to do. And they'll be in for it. They'll go into the prison camps. They'll get the retinal eye scanners to ID who they are and in their system, and just keep them locked up. And again, those are the states that I mentioned that I wouldn't want to be in: California and Oregon and Washington.
Yeah. In the meantime, where do you see our government?
Fighting really hard. I mean, first they're going to withdraw from overseas, so they're going to withdraw from the Middle East. there is this policy that's going to be out there about nuclear weapons, because people think MAD is what keeps this from happening. But Russia has been saying, and China has been saying for a while now, and they'll make it quite clear when they declare war on America, that if the first country that uses a nuke in this war will receive the entire stockpile of Russia and China right back in response. And so nobody's going to want to do that. So they'll withdraw completely out of the Middle East except for Israel, and they'll want Israel to use one of their nukes to help deal with what's going on in there. But our troops are going to come home to defend the homeland, and they're going to set up along the Rocky Mountains, and that's why I don't see them getting any farther. They're getting into California and Nevada, but they're not getting much past that. And that's because our boys, not only the people that are trained, but even armed civilians are fighting back, and I never really see them winning. I just see this gruesome aspect in California and states like that. And I also see a gruesome aspect along the Mississippi River from our own evils as Americans. There are some greedy, evil Americans out there, and they're going to congregate along the Mississippi River Valley for whatever reason and be violent on each other. And so there is this safe zone along the Rocky Mountains, and it's just east of the Rocky Mountains where the good people are, where the fighters are there, the fathers with guns who are willing to protect their wives, and all the people that are kind of being gathered together by the Creator, basically, for the next step, for what happens after this war. Because really what's going to end this war is an act of God. It's not a man's thing. That's why I can use the term Antichrist, because I use that term as a man who thinks his way is the best way, a human way of creating the world, or a person who thinks that they have the solution. So, that's what Hitler was doing. He had the ideal world that he wanted to go and create, and that was a man ego-based concept that had nothing to do with the Creator. And so the final Antichrist, this final Russian leader that comes up and starts to strike and then gains power from it, and is going to seduce the rest of the world. I mean, us Americans are going to suffer, but for 3.5 years, the rest of the world is just going to sit back and let us take it.
You mentioned that these things would happen after our own country comes down a couple notches. What do you see in regards to that, knowing what we know about the UN saying that they may have to provide the United States with food rations if the economy implodes? We see a lot of people in the economic elite in our own country, in the global marketplace, getting their money out of the United States. Where do you see America in the next year economically?
The only thing I can first of all, I'm not a banker. I could care less about money, so I don't focus that much on it, but I am aware of its impact in the world stage. And so if we have I'm not sure what's going to happen. I personally think we're going to have a good year. Not necessarily financially, but as Americans, our lives are going to be better. This is actually a better year than last year, say. But what will happen is when our economy starts to negatively impact the international community, that's when you're going to find Russia coming forward and blaming and using those kinds of scenarios, which they're already doing, to make us the enemy, that our way of us forcing our way into other countries and into other systems and into other worlds is how they're going to get us.
So what you're saying is this can come as a total shock. Life can be going on as usual. You're talking about the television sets reporting the chaos from the natural disasters prior to the invasion. So you're saying there'll be a somewhat of a level of stability prior to that.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, things will get bad and things will get worse in those terms. The natural disasters are going to have an economic impact. Losing San Francisco, there's no way you can't have a massive economic impact from losing San Francisco. So those things are going to happen, but I don't see it as like this kind of crisis. The crisis is the day the missiles start to shower down, and that's the day we lose power, and that's the day we're now having to cook on open fires. That's the day where we lose being America. That's the day where America falls in an hour. And so all those other things, all these threats that are going on, that's why I say live it up this year. This is a good year. This is the year to enjoy being American. Go out and buy something if you can.
Get something to help you cook that food, maybe perhaps, or maybe some water containers too as well. I guess while the dollar is still working to a certain degree. Let me ask you this, Leon. How do your visions work, your dreams work in terms of time? Can you see time in terms of the year? Some people say, you know, it's just a dream, it's just something you see or you experience in a lucid fashion, but there's no date attached.
You know, I've had lots of dreams. I've had regular dreams that are dreamy dreams. I've had dreams that are in color, dreams that I barely remember, dreams that I remember later, dreams that are lucid, dreams that are, and there's a very distinct difference in a precognitive dream. When I have a precognitive dream, I feel like it maybe has already happened. You know, the last one I had, I sent to you, is the Russian sub, that there was a Russian sub in San Francisco Bay surveying and finding the coordinates for the missile shield for when they strike. And when I wake up the next day, I feel like maybe that sub is in the bay right now, and this is happening now, and that's how real it really feels. So there's a pretty big distinction in that. Plus, there is life experience from it that started in my teens. So the first thing I ever saw was Northridge happening. Just having a lucid dream, seeing a sign of LA and a newscaster saying LA has just had a 7-point earthquake, and then seeing these overpasses all collapse. And it was so real to me that I woke up the next day thinking it had happened, and got up and turned on the news and looked at it and I spent all day looking at CNN trying to figure out where the LA, and there was no earthquake. And it wasn't until 8 months later that then we're seeing on LA these helicopter views of all the overpasses that collapsed from the. So I've had these experiences with this. So I don't know when these things are happening. I just know that when I watch Putin say the things that he's saying and the statements that are coming out of Russia and the movements and the posturing, it feels very, very close.
It's
very,
like,
very near.
It's like, at what point will this rhetoric end the war begin? And I'm looking at resource depletion and a lot of maneuvering just over that issue alone. What is your take, though, on earthquakes? Because there have been a number of them in Indonesia in a short span of time recently. There was just one in Nevada, I believe, and there was one in the UK recently, and there are some others happening around the world in a short span of time. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I was just looking at that. I do think we are having a pole shift. I mean, I think we're actually scientifically able to register and verify that that's going on. But there is a point in time where literally that magnetic field reverses. And so I think there's some kind of shift happening in there that's triggering these earthquakes in odd locations where we don't normally see them. And, you know, if that gets worse, it could trigger more and trigger the plates. And I've had visions of the Pacific plate specifically twisting counterclockwise and building pressure up in Mexico and causing earthquakes from San Diego, of course the ones I've mentioned in San Francisco, and then volcanic activity in Oregon and Washington. And we've been seeing signs of that with earthquakes, underwater earthquakes off of Eureka. Signs that plate could possibly start shifting and moving.
There's also,
but I see it becoming very, very active, and Japan also needs to watch out. Japan's going to be pounded by big, big earthquakes, and so they're getting warned with these big earthquakes on the outside. They'll work their way inward and start hitting the cities and causing damage.
let's get back to the middle of America where a lot of people unite, you say, in the mountain range. And you do say that there is light at the end of the tunnel over a period of time, after a period of time. What does that look like again in terms of the war ending?
Well, again, I see an act of God ending the war. You know, part of the UFO phenomena, seeing UFOs over cities, is part of that, the signs of things to come. And I believe in rapture, and I understand the background if you do the research on rapture and who started the story of rapture and where it came from. And some people view that story as a reason not to believe in rapture, and I view that as a reason to believe in rapture, because the origins, even though there are American origins of rapture, are not that old. The origins are from a dream, and it's from a little girl dreaming about being taken off the earth in the end days and brought right up into heaven and brought back to the new earth. And I'm a dreamer, and I dream these dreams too, and I've dreamt that hundreds of times, and that's probably the first dream I ever remember was looking up in the sky one day and seeing the sky filled with UFOs, different shapes and sizes and colors, and it felt good, and there was a feeling of hope. And then since I've had many other versions of that and seen that, so as I've seen Japan falling, I've seen people in a kind of a quantum mechanical way taken from where they are out of their apartment or their home just before the earthquake hits and being taken to this other realm. I see it working in a way, it's very quantum mechanical, so it needs to work in a way that their mind will be able to process and understand. So some people, it would be okay for an extraterrestrial to beam down and say, hey, we need to get off the planet, and beam up to a UFO, because their mind could handle that. For some people with different religious backgrounds, they might need an angel to kind of open a big gateway of light and say, come on, let's, take a lift here. Or for someone, so whatever is going to work is how that's going to happen. And that's going to happen, as soon as the earthquake starts. So I would say even as soon as the Marin earthquake starts happening, people will be taken in rapture, and you won't even know about it. You won't be hearing about that in the news. What you'll be hearing about is all the people missing and presumed dead. But you won't know that they were taken in rapture, and they're on a UFO or a holographic reality that's comfortable for them. So you imagine an old grandma who's used to the casino. She might be in a holographic casino waiting until it's time to come back to the earth. So when the war's over, and then the physical ending of the war is when it's all moved to the Middle East, because this war is on America for 3.5 years. But then eventually Russia will move through Syria and head towards Israel to attack. And once Israel sees that, they will be the first ones to use a tactical nuke, and they'll try to scare them away with one nuke, and Russia and China will follow through on their threat and blow up Israel with their entire nuclear arsenal, and it melts. And then that's the moment when all the UFOs and Christ literally is coming down and maybe even reversing the damage that's being done, cleansing. Had a vision of watching the earth make the transition from this dimension to the next dimension from the perspective of being on a UFO. And I was being instructed by Christ what I was seeing and what was going on. And so once this happens, the earth kind of makes a dimensional shift. Part of the reason darkness and evil and pain and death and sadness exists is quantum. It's a particle. You would call it the Lucifer particle. And when this shift happens, it's like pulling it through a strainer, pulling the earth and our reality through a strainer and removing that Lucifer particle and now no longer is there this violence and darkness and evil and yucky stuff. And once the earth's been cleansed, that's when everyone can be repopulated. So the people that are living will come back, and they're going to have this fantastic, amazing story about God and how cool God is, and the old earth and how fucked up that was, and why we really need to live in harmony with the Creator.
Leon, I'm going to hold you over for about 3 more minutes. For those watching, in 5 minutes' time, we will take your phone calls to get your reaction to this topic. Leon, why do so many roads seem to lead to 2012?
Well, I guess that's the moment time in this world ends. I mean, everyone's looking at the same thing. It brings me to what you've been saying the whole time, and I did actually have a vision of this when I first got on the internet. I had a dream that I was dreaming that other people were dreaming the same dreams, and that as I posted on the internet, I'd start to notice and see other people that were also having the same dreams.
I found it too, and I've had them too.
So I think we're all dreaming the same dream, and whether it's us living now or 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago, because in one of those references, Washington saw this coming, and so we're all dreaming the same dream. And if it was the Egyptians or the Mayans or all the different cultures, we've all had a fascination with how the world will end or transition or change. I think we all know it will change anyway, and that's why we look at it for how is it going to do it. And those that are really tuned into that, tuned into the universal acacia where it's stored, everything that's already happened and will ever happen is stored in what's called the universal acacia. So someone really tuned into that can go into that and get specific information like Nostradamus did or like the Egyptians did.
These things aren't taught anymore, Leon. The fact that some of us actually have those gifts or have a part of our brain that can tap into what some have called the wireless internet.
Well, that's the control game. You know, you couldn't control this planet if we were all clairvoyant. And there are nasty entities and beings that are also on this planet. It's a free will zone, and it's a multidimensional reality we live in. So nobody wants humans clairvoyant. How could you control the masses? That includes the presidents, but that includes all the alien energies and all the weird, nasty dimensional energies that control and feed off human pain. So nobody wants this taught. It really is the secret.
Before we let you go, that place of hope that we all want to hold in our heart, no matter what we experience, no matter what we see, no matter how many dead bodies that may fall around us, no matter what may happen in the future, how do we maintain that hope?
I think you're going to have to create that hope, and I think you're going to have to visualize that hope. You know, I think that if these things do unfold for a lot of people, for Americans, it's going to be a good thing because they're going to know why this is happening. I mean, this will be kind of like the Christian Holocaust. It'll be an attack on the Christians. You know, the only ones that aren't going to take the mark are going to be Christians because they're not going to take the mark. So an American that doesn't care about that might take the mark, but a Christian isn't. So this is going to become like a Christian Holocaust. And so it's really believing and having faith as a Christian or whatever denomination you believe in. You know, I think there's truth in all of them. And so part of creating that is knowing that there's, you know, I'm trying to word this properly. The energy is going to try to threaten you and tell you we're living in a world of terror and fear and blah, blah, blah. You're going to have to see yourself living in joy and happiness and living with God and just feel that in your mind, feel that in your body, really just visualize that 5 minutes a day to separate from all the energy that'll be going on around you and really having faith. And so I want people to consider the rapture theory, that that's a real thing, and it's not something that happens in one day, and it's not something that causes trauma. It's something that people won't even notice is going on. So if you're really being threatened, God is that there for you, that he can send an angel down into your room right now and open some dimensional door up and take you physically into that another realm and keep you safe from anything. All this stuff, all this horrifying stuff. So you just have to believe it. So you just have to create it. You just have to visualize it. You have to see yourself living in that level of joy and being that loved, you know. So that's the best answer I can give you.
At the very least, you got to put your mind there because there is a war on for your mind. Leon, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.